Okay, so good morning, and we have a new parsha this week, Parsha Vayetze. Um, and just first of all, it's very interesting because there's what's called the Devar Malchus, the last sip of the Rebbe on this week's parsha, and he has a very fascinating point. He says that the main story of Avraham and Yitzchak was in Eretz Yisrael. In fact, the beginning, Avraham was only 75 when God came to him and said, Lech Lecha, it's time for you to pick up and go. And we're to Eretz Yisrael. So the beginning of the Jewish people begins in the land of Israel. We find the exact opposite with Yaakov. The beginning of Yaakov's story, or the main fact of Yaakov's story, is that in this week's parsha, last week's parsha told us was all about his birth, Yaakov and Asa, and the birthright. The main part of the story is Vayetze Yaakov. Yaakov listened to his father, and he went to Padan Aram. He went to Haran to his, I guess it was his uncle Lavan, in order to get married. Over there, what do we find? It's not an easy situation. He's got to deal with his father-in-law, who's a crook, and a con man. And then after the next parsha, the parsha of Yishlach, what happens is he actually goes and he has to deal with Esau. And only later, Vayeshev, he comes back into Eretz Yisrael. And furthermore, we find that much of the story of Yaakov takes place then in Egypt, right? Yosef. So we find an interesting dichotomy that the first of the Avos, they are Eretz Yisrael Jews, right? Holiness. Whereas Yaakov, who's called the Bechir Sheba Avos, the best of them. Why is he called the best of them? Because Yaakov understood, he analyzed, he was Ish Tom, Yosef Holland. It was a person that learned, and he understood that the way of Avraham, even though of course he was such a great tzaddik, has a certain deficiency. As we find, that Yishmael came from Avraham. So a person who's just kind and loving, you have hippies and everything's beautiful. A friend of mine who was a hippie, he says the hippies are very loving until you sit in their hammock. In other words, just having this openness can lead, of course, to a big hole in the structure, and we find that that's actually happening in society today. Whereas this good line, it says that bad times make strong people make good times make weak people make bad times. So when things are good, you see it clearly in Western civilization, unfortunately today, but it's the history of humanity that sometimes societies get it right and they create prosperity and freedom, etc. And then what happens is that the people within are so lazy and basically not focused on what's important that they actually let it go. That's how the Roman Empire fell. That's how the Greek Empire fell. It comes from an internal decay, because just having love and just having safety doesn't mean that you're progressing in the right direction. It's nice, it's great, like a child that has everything they need. It doesn't mean that they're going to have what to look back on in their life and say, wow, I accomplished something special. So the first step is to understand. Um, okay, so Yitzchak kind of went the opposite way. Yitzchak was Gvura. He was like, nope, it's right and wrong. We find he gives a lecture to Avimelech, the king of Plishtim. Why did you do this? Yitzchak is the opposite. He never leaves Eretz Yisrael. He's ready to give his life for Hashem. He's like a very, obviously both Avraham and Yitzchak had the opposite. How do we find it by Avraham that he was ready to sacrifice his son, which is the opposite of Chesed. So he was ready. He kicked out Yishmael, which he didn't want to do. It's the opposite of Chesed. So he had the ability to actually do the opposite. And Yitzchak also, we find kindness. He wanted to bless Esau. He wanted to bring Esau back into the fold. So it's not that they were deficient. They were very great tzaddikim. However, their basic tendency, Avraham was unconditional kindness. Yitzchak was Gvura, kind of self-discipline, right from wrong. And of course, Yitzchak had an Esav. Esav is what we call the discipline of klipa, right? It's about Esav is al charbacha tichya, my way or the highway. We came, we saw, we conquered. This kind of strictness which borders on abuse, which is not good. So it's very interesting because Yaakov is Tiferes. Yaakov is Torah. Yaakov has two qualities. The quality of emes, titin emes liYaakov, give truth to Yaakov, as well as the quality of rachamim, quality of compassion. And why is compassion very, very different to love? If you think about love and compassion, they seem similar, but they're very different. Because love is, in a certain sense, how you make me feel. I love you because basically it's an extension of self-love. So when a person loves themselves, they love others. So it's like children, maybe they love everyone. It's a beautiful emotion, but again, it's like its energy is too scattered. Good morning. It's not necessarily focused enough. And Gevura, again, has holiness, self-discipline. You find some people that are very disciplined, but it's not sweet enough. It's too strict. But compassion is a unique kind of emotion because compassion is not saying, oh, I just love everyone. Compassion and truth are what is the right thing to do. So it depends. Sometimes you do give, sometimes you don't give. Who do you give to more? Who do you give to less? If you think about the Torah is circles of love. You have to take care of your wife first, your family, maybe your community, the Jews of Israel, the Talmud Chacham. There's a whole structure. So if a person just loves, they're like, whoever it comes to first, whoever asks me first. But if a person has a sense of truth and compassion, there's a sense of its tendency is towards love, but it has a structure. It's the mixture of chesed and gvura together. And that is very important. Why? Because then the chesed doesn't go to the wrong places. And the gevura is not just raw gevura. That's the benefit. So the Rebbe says an interesting thing. How come Yaakov, he is the one that his whole life story is outside of Eretz Yisrael? His life story is in Pharaoh, dealing with Lavan. Then he's got to deal with Asa. Then he's got to deal with Shechem. Then he's got to deal with Mitzrayim. He's the poor guy. But that is the whole point of life. The Alter Rebbe, it says about the Alter Rebbe that he spent 7 years looking for the truth, 7 years to weed out any evil from within him, and 7 years to implement the truth. And this is very interesting. What is the truth that the Alter Rebbe found? Well, you say you're all students of the Alter Rebbe, of Chassidus for many years. What was the truth? What was the truth that the Alter Rebbe found? Give up?
What is the truth?
The truth. What is the truth?
Reality.
Huh?
Reality or more than reality. What is beyond?
But it's beyond reality. So what's the primary reason for existence? Right? That would be the ultimate question. What's the primary reason for existence? Yesterday I had a group. We brought them to Shul here. So there's a very special guy here, Gabriel. So he's the thank you Hashem guy. Special neshama. So as we were walking by, one guy goes, "You are Mashiach now." So Gabriel says to him, "Why do you say that?" I said to him, "What's wrong with what he said?" So he told me, he says, "I discovered to get any truth, you have to ask the deepest questions. The deepest question is, why do you exist?" Like if you ask the question, you can get the answer. So the first question is, what is the truth? Why do we exist? And Alter Rebbe understood, and this is what he says, I've mentioned it before, Hatam ha'amiti, the true reason why we exist is the Baal Tshuva. So all of us, our souls come from Chachma of Atzilus, Malchus of Atzilus. Over there in Atzilus, what makes Atzilus Atzilus? Atzilus is Etzlei V'Samach. It's close to God. What's the difference between a higher world? There are 4 spiritual worlds. Within that, there are infinite worlds. What makes the difference between a higher and a lower world? How much Hashem is revealed. So why do you have to take your poor soul that saw Hashem? In fact, it says that every night the neshama goes up to Hashem and it screams to Hashem, "Get me out of here. I can't handle it." Because really the purpose of this world is us, the body, the physical self. The spiritual self is really there to help the physical self go in the right direction. So it's imagine you have a teacher, and the teacher is this brilliant man, the greatest mind and heart in the world. And then the king hires him, and he's got to educate the prince. But this prince is a low life. He's into all this grubkite. And every day the teacher's like, Your Highness, get me out of here. Can't handle the situation what I'm dealing with. In fact, it's interesting. I once heard that cry. It was a dream. And you can't imagine what kind of a cry that cry is. The neshama is in pain. It's in serious pain that it's here. One of the things of a yid is a way of Yaakov is to have rachmanas on your neshama. Feel bad for your soul. Do a mitzvah, because when you do a mitzvah, you light up the soul. There was a lady actually at Ascent, a little program this week. So at 13, she had a very interesting near-death experience. And since then, she has a gift. Like, she could see a person's, like, neshama. It's unbelievable. She went around the table. She was able to tell everybody who they are and their mission. But one of the things she said, there's a Rebbetzin, I forgot her name, Vital Levy. She's quite, big in Israel. She had a very powerful near-death experience. And one of the things that she saw, she went to Lamayla, she saw, I guess, something like souls that were covered like in black sackcloth or something like that. She said, what's going on? These are people that on the yard site, nobody davens for them. So something small, these people that have been to heaven, they understand how every word you say, it says in the Zohar, pierces the heavens. Everything we're doing here. Somebody asked me a question yesterday. If we could have AI read Tehillim, would that work? And I said no, because the whole thing is Hashem wants the person that has a Yetzer Hara and he could be watching football, and instead he's reading Tehillim. So, let me just remember. So what's the difference between the higher world? In the higher world, you see Hashem. So why did the four soul have to come to this world, into a place, the whole world is Helim, a concealment where you don't see Hashem? I have a good idea for God. Take away the concealment. Mashiach's going to come, there'll be no more concealment. We'll see how the whole world is God. Everybody's going to do all the Torah mitzvahs. There'll be no issues. In fact, the little child in the womb studies the whole Torah. He comes out of the womb, he forgets everything. I have a good idea. Make him not forget the Torah. He'll be a tzaddik. So it means that that's not the goal. Being a tzaddik is not the goal. Because if being a tzaddik was the goal, the whole world wouldn't have been made. And if it would be made, it would be made in a way we see Hashem, we'd be tzaddik. What makes a tzaddik? Because he sees. And the answer is that the world was made for the Baal Tshuva. Hashem wanted us to choose him. When the Alter Rebbe discovered this truth, the Alter Rebbe, many people don't know this, but the Alter Rebbe went around for 5 years through the shtetla, through the little hamlets of Europe to make Bali Tshuva. And in fact, what is the book of the Alter Rebbe's book? Sefer Shel Beinanim. It's how the average person can become a Bali Tshuva. The average person can connect to Hashem. And of course, this whole, not a Chabad Rebbe, but a Rebbe said, the whole world was made for our generation, the generation before Mashiach. And what's unique about our generation? All of our souls have been here many times. It says, Dar Hilach Dar Ba, generation comes, goes, the same generation, we reincarnated. So what are we doing now? Now we're becoming Bali Tshuva. The Bali Tshuva is somebody that has what's called B'chele Yater. He has this great passion. As I'd like to mention, who loves their father more? The child that grows up with the father's so nice, they have a real love. Or the orphan. The orphan has this tremendous longing. And the person that tasted the darkness and the aimlessness of this life, they're the ones that really have this tremendous love for Hashem. So just to conclude, the conclusion is as follows. That why was Yaakov sent into Paran? Why is his story of life in the world? Because that's the mission. The mission is to go into the world and to light up the world. So it's true, Abraham and Yitzchak were in Eretz Yisrael and they were very holy and they established everything. But Yaakov actually was more involved in the actual mission. To go into the darkness, into the Lavan, into the Esav, into the Egypt, into the worst places. And there convert that mentality into from being evil to being basically civilized. And then from civilized to being spiritual.